Okay, so I'm going to try to tackle a classic today. I have here Georg Simmel's on individuality and social forms, and I'm going to try to see if we can't clarify and really go at. I think just one of the best pieces that if anyone hasn't read, you really go get this book, get to the library, find somebody who has a copy, get a copy. But the chapter is called The Transcendent Character of Life. And Simmel wrote this all the way back in 1918. Just amazing. But he's a master dialectician, and he's trying to talk about these kinds of these dialectics in life that give life what he calls determinacy, but also richness. And it has to do with mediating between poles or between extremes, but it's also a way of setting boundaries so that boundaries can be transcended. That is, we need the boundaries, but the boundaries are necessarily transcended. And it's not just, occasionally and here and there that we do this. I mean, his argument is basically that all thought, all consciousness, that's what conscious life is. No matter what you think about, no matter how you try to come at anything in the world, you're going to be beset by these set of problems that are very dialectic of navigating between extremes and setting boundaries such that those boundaries are always going to be transcended. Now you need the boundary, but you'll need to transcend it. So it's sort of like we need limits so as to surpass those limits. It's just a absolutely fascinating account, and I'm going to try to see if I can't give I'll see if I can't talk a little bit about what he's saying here. And I'm going to read a little bit and then talk about it a little bit more. And he says, we are all like the chess player in this regard. If he did not know to a certain extent what the consequences of a certain move would be, the game would be impossible. But it would also be impossible if this foresight extended indefinitely. Plato's definition of the philosopher as he who stands between knowing and not knowing holds for man in general. Right? He says we are able to express our essence with a paradox. We are bounded in every direction, and yet we are bounded in no direction. Okay, I'm going to see if I can explain this a little bit more. Now, think of all the ways that this is. I mean, it's in everything. It's thought. Like right here. We say something. We go, well, that's not right exactly either. I mean, if you had full knowledge of everything, it would be in some way you wouldn't even be there. I mean, it's like thought has to be limited, and then we see the limits, and then we go past them. See, this is why we always have this problem of what's at the edge of the universe, right? Because we're thinking about it in a certain way, thought isolates this supposed limit, but then by talking about it as a limit, you're able to already be beyond the limit. Or you couldn't even recognize it as a limit. See, part of the problem is that a boundary, recognized as a boundary, is to already be on the other side of it. Yeah, I mean, I guess in a paradoxical way, you could say humans are outside and beyond their own death. Because death, for us, is recognized as a boundary, you're already on the other side of it. Yeah, you want to know what the afterlife is? The afterlife is that realm to which you're already aware, what's after that? What comes after the afterlife? Why aren't people interested in that? Let me guess, it's turtles all the way down. I mean, it's thought is so funny. He says, let's see here. Let's see, I'm just see if I can't give some of the examples. Well, we'll take time, There's a present, but we get outside of the present by postulating some past or some future. Well, in some way, we're recognizing this limit, the present, but then we're never just stuck in the present. We leap outside it into the future. But then that future, too, has a kind of boundary, which, in order to recognize it as a boundary, thought is already outside of it. It's past it. It deals with it in terms of this dialectic, I guess, of distance. He says here, That we are cognizant of our knowing and our not knowing, and are likewise aware of this broader cognizance, and so forth into the possibility of endlessness, this is the real infinity of vital movement on the level of the intellect. Every limit is herewith transcended, but of course only as a result of the fact that it is set. That is, there exists something to transcend. And he goes on, he says, this really does introduce a kind of paradox, because in the history of philosophy, we end up with something like this, he says this sort of sum up philosophy, and I guess he's tracing it down to what Goethe, but he says, man is something that is to be overcome. And he says, logically considered, right, this too presents a contradiction. Who overcomes himself is to be sure the victor, but he is also the defeated. He says, yet contradiction only arises when one hardens the two aspects of this unity into opposed, mutually exclusive conceptions. He says, no, that's really not what's going on. He says, that man overcomes himself means that he reaches out beyond the bounds which the moment sets for him. There must be something at hand to be overcome, but it is only there for the purpose of being overcome. So, as an ethical agent, man is the limited being that has no limit. This notion of the limited being who has no limit, that's partly what thought is. You can say something, you can say, well, wait, no, that's not right. And then you say, well, it was partly right. And we're continuously dealing with the degree to which the concept gives us a limit, but then we have to refine that. We go, well, no, that's really not exactly what it was either, right? He says, life is at once flux without pause, and yet something enclosed in bearers, in contents, formed about midpoints, individualized, and therefore always a bounded form which continually jumps its bounds. That is its essence. Transcendence is eminence. Transcendence is eminent in life. This notion that life and all its fronts, and especially thought, when thought tries to identify a content, tries to individuate and individualize some particular idea, some particular moment, some particular concept, we introduce a kind of boundary, but that boundary always ends up being transcended. It ends up being something that you have to be on the outside of to recognize the shortcomings of, to see how it doesn't fit in order to, I guess, really think with it. And it's sort of like we need words in order to see how words fail us. All right. Thank you.